The Battle of Chickamauga was the second bloodiest clash in America's history. The first day of fighting in September 1863 was a standoff, the two sides facing one another in parallel lines that stretched miles north to south across the northwest Georgia countryside. Then calamity struck. The morning of the second day, a Union division pulled out of the line, creating a gaping hole. Moments later, a massed Confederate charge hit the gap, throwing the Federal Army into disarray. When Confederates poured through the gap, many Union commanders led their units to the rear. Here and there, stalwart officers led their men to the sound of the guns, doing what they could to stem the Confederate onslaught. In June 2012, Georgia poet Emma Cottrell, then 86 years old, visited the place where Union General William H. Lytle counterattacked. She took a seat on the concrete base of the Lytle monument, looked into the distance, and envisioned what had happened 149 years earlier. Her eyes showed that, for her, it was no longer June 25, 2012. For her, it was September 20th, 1863. She wrote, "Only the dead can speak with tongues of fire." The Poet Warrior by Emma Cottrell. September 20th, 1863, second day of the Battle of Chickamauga. Red as blood rose the sun above the wild Georgia mountains, unrelenting, ominous, aglow upon the waters of a creek called Chickamauga, River of Death, by an Indian chief who once dwelled along its banks. The night had been freezing, no campfires allowed. Icy blasts cut through the soggy uniforms of southern cotton and northern wool equally. The dying moaned like keening winds, prayed for water, begged someone, anyone, to help them. Chilling screams of agony from massacred horses shattered the darkness. Dread and uncertainty lay like a funeral pall over vistas of trampled fields, splintered trees, and swollen corpses, a ghastly stage on which the final drama of Chickamauga was about to be played out. Higher climbed the sun, drew away the ghostly fog that hung over weary soldiers, then relentlessly baked them. Conditions were chaotic, early battle orders cloudy and contradictory. With only minutes to set up a line of defense, Ohioan General William H. Lytle swept from the dense forest, positioned the lead regiment, 88th Illinois, signaled the 36th into line on its right, and brought up the 24th Wisconsin. 60 yards across the field of stubble and sedge, solid lines of Confederates were storming towards them, their hats down, their bayonets at charge, their old familiar rebel yell curdling the blood. A born fighting man, cool in battle, sure of the trust of his men, Lytle shouted, "Forward, into line, on the double quick!" Spinning his horse around, he galloped into the lead, gestured emphatically with his saber, and rallied the troops with a boisterous, "Boys, if we whip 'em today, we'll eat Christmas dinner at home." Suddenly General Lytle leaned in his saddle, eyes gleaming wildly, voice eerily calm. "I'm hit." Still he sat his horse, aflame in the mystifying ecstasy of battle, ready to kill or be killed, biting back the agony, yelling to his lieutenant as the rebels converged from three sides, "For God's sake, bring up another regiment." Seconds later, a Minié ball smashed into his left cheek, passed through his right temple, and sent hot blood welling up so rapidly in his mouth he could not speak. His aide caught him as he reeled from his horse. At the risk of their own lives, in the midst of deadly grape, canister, and shell, his men carried him to a small knoll and gently placed him beneath a tree. Here the general lay dying, his gaze fixed on the torn and shattered leaves above, the sound of Gabriel's trumpet growing louder, the clamor of battle dimmer, the huzzas of the rebels never heard. Victorious Confederates found the body of Lytle amid the carnage on the field at Chickamauga. With the mien of a battle leader, He had been a man among men, a lawyer, a legislator, a decorated general, and a famous poet. In the gallantry and elan of the Old South, an honor guard was posted over his body. As word of his death spread across the battlefield, many soldiers in gray made their way to what is now called Lytle Hill, some of whom had learned his poems by heart as schoolboys. Around campfires that night, spoken lines of his poetry drifted across the smoldering battlefield, poignant, ethereal. The aftermath. For the warrior poet and thousands of brave men, the war had ended. For the living, the bitter conflict would rage on. What was left of the Army of the Cumberland slithered noiselessly through the shell-shivered forests of Chickamauga, snaked back to the entrenchments around Chattanooga, and waited. The Confederates secured the body of General Lytle, the poet-soldier respected by North and South alike. Confederate General Patton Anderson, Lytle's friend before the war, sent Lytle's wedding ring and a lock of his hair to his widow in Cincinnati. Today, 97-year-old Emma Cottrell lives close to family in South Carolina. Her poem about General Lytle was published in the winter 2012 issue of Georgia Backroads. You can obtain a copy at georgiabackroads.com or by calling 800-547-1625. Thank you for watching.